Hello, hello. I'm Bob Duffy, and welcome to Between Two Bites. As always, I'm here with my very good friend Eric Mantion, and we're checking out the backstories and insights of game developers, creators, and master coders. In this episode, we're going to discuss innovation in the pipeline tools for game dev and VFX. We have Eskil Steenberg of Solaar and Tim and Alex Porter of Montec Labs. This is a brainy bunch, and Eric and I are going to try to keep up. So let's spin the logo and welcome our guests. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the show.
Hello.
Thank
Hi,
you.
thanks for having us.
All right, so let's first do introductions. We'll start with Alex. Wave hi.
Hello. I'm Alex Porter. I'm the CEO of Montec Labs. We are a platform for automating production and glad to be here.
Excellent. Go ahead, Tim.
All right, I'm Tim Porter, CTO of Montec Labs. Spent 10 years in the game and movie industry. In games, I was a technical artist. In movies, I was a pipeline technical director. And now I'm putting all my energy towards automated and virtual production.
And I'm Eskil Steenberg. I'm head of Solaar, and it's a R&D company that is developing games and other software, mostly software dealing with creativity. And lately, I've been spending a lot of times working on a fully automated UV Unwrapper called Ministerial Flat.
Excellent. And you all have lovely backgrounds. I'm just here in this blank white canvas. I'm in the middle of moving, so I'm in an apartment, and yeah, and Eric has his lovely outdoor background. So thank you guys for making the show a little bit more colorful with your backgrounds. We want to get into a little bit about what you guys do first. So Eskil, let's start with you. You just mentioned your UV Unwrapper. So talk to us a little bit about that tool. What does it do, and kind of what is it trying to solve? Why is UV unwrapping a problem?
So UV Unwrapping is the process of taking a three-dimensional object that you have modeled in a modeling application like Blender or 3D Studio Max or Maya or whatever your favorite tool might be. And what you need to do once you've made the actual shape is to put a texture on it and put material properties. And you do that by taking a two-dimensional image and putting it on the surface. But the surface is not two-dimensional, it's three-dimensional. So what you need to do is essentially unwrap the 3D model and flatten it out so that you can then put the texture on it. And this is this sort of weird step that you need to do that you don't become aware of until you get into computer graphics that is really, really boring and takes a lot of
Yes.
time. And if you do it wrong, the quality of your output is going to suffer. So it's skillful, it's hard, it's time consuming, and it's boring, and it's pretty much the part of the process of making 3D graphics that has the least sort of artistic input. You can't really make your art better. You can only make it worse by failing at UV mapping.
That's a good point.
Um,
If we think about this, yeah, if you've done it, you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe how crazy, stupid, difficult, and hard this is. And then you realize, whenever you play a game, it's like, that was UV unwrapped. That was UV unwrapped. Every single asset in there
yeah,
had to be UV unwrapped. Somebody went through the process to do this, to cut the seams and do it right and figure out that, so there's not stretching and all that kind of stuff. It is just a crazy, boring thing that just the industry has not solved, and you're solving it.
yeah, people have been trying for at least 30 years to come up with lots and lots of solutions. If you look through the literature, there's a whole world of surface parametrization papers you can go and read, and there's some good stuff there, but generally there's sort of two problems, I would say. Neither any of the application algorithms that are out there are not complete. They sort of work really well in a certain test case and in a certain kind of model. And a lot of times you need to spend a lot of time helping those algorithms by sort of guiding them. So that's one problem. The other problem is that they don't quite do it the way artists want it to be done. So Normally, you don't want stretching, for instance, and you don't want seams. That's kind of the basic thing. But if you just make an algorithm that minimizes stretching and minimizes seams, you don't actually get very good results. What you also care about is things like rotation, because a texture is an image, and images have pixels, and pixels are in rows. So you want those rows to sort of follow the geometry. So if you have a square, you want the texture to be square on top of that, so that if you paint an edge, you get a straight line, you don't get jaggies. And when you then have something that is a square but not quite a square, an almost square, then you actually want to UV map it as a square, because it's better to have it a little bit of stretching than getting jaggies on your model. And that's a judgment call. It's a really tricky judgment call. And if you're a very seasoned UV mapping artist, you know about a billion of those tricks to make it look good, where you sort of not quite follow the rules, but actually you get a better outcome. And a lot of people ask me, like, how do you avoid stretching? And it's funny because almost half of my code is about putting in stretching, but in the right
In the right
places.
places, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you know
Curves
some
and things. Yeah.
yeah. So sometimes people, they have applications where you can measure how much stretching you have, and that you can say, oh, this is, mathematically not ideal. But that's true. But, reality isn't simple math. It's more complicated than that. And there's more things to care about.
Well, we're glad you're worrying about it, so a lot of us don't have to. And just so people know, they may have actually touched your code and not even known it. So is it okay to say where somebody might
Yes.
find where your stuff is?
Yes. So, a year and a half ago, I signed a deal with the Maxon, so you can now find my UV Unwrapper inside of Cinema 4D. So anyone who's licensee of Cinema 4D already has access to a great version of it, and a continuously updated version. So I'm working with Maxon to continue giving them the technology. But it's also available on the website ministryofflat.com. So you can go there and you can buy it. And there's a command line version, and there's also a UI version. And that's available to anyone. It works with whatever tool you like to use. So it's not just for Cinema 4D users.
And Bob, just I know we didn't plan for this,
Yep.
but Alex, if you point over your left shoulder, she has a piece of art on the wall that very much feels like that's a UV unwrapping.
It
It
does.
feels like if I took it off the wall and I folded it just the right way, it would become a 3D shape. And wasn't a planned thing, but I think for the viewers at home, that might actually be a perfect example of that's kind of what it looks like. He takes it, he smushes it flat, you can do texture, and then he reassembles it back up like a magician.
One of the
Yeah.
easiest ways to think about it is actually a tin can, how tin cans are built.
Yeah.
You end up having a flat surface, you get this
Yeah.
art that goes across it, it's cut and then it's rolled onto the surface, and that's what's called a cylindrical map.
So,
I
I always
The
think
UV
of
unwrapping on your wall is, I have to say, really bad because it doesn't pack well. I'm just,
No, I know that's a
he
lot of
didn't.
wasted space. What is that,
if you put a
18%
square
use?
texture around that, you're a lot of texture space. So I
Oh,
have to
yeah.
interject
All right.
and
I
say,
could have done better.
Oh no.
But
T,
I am
That's what
doing
on the
happens when
wall
you
art.
get zero stretch. That's what happens when you get zero stretch, right? It's all wasted space.
Well, actually, in that particular case, you can you don't have to stretch more, but you definitely want to cut more, because
Yeah,
if you
sure.
cut and get more pieces, you can puzzle them together and have more to play with. So
Correct.
Very,
yeah.
very cool. Yeah, so you can find this stuff out there. This is one of the amazing things that it's from I'm sorry, from you guys, from the innovators out there. You're just doing this stuff. You're solving big problems that some of the big players aren't touching. And so let's start talking about what Montec Labs is doing. You guys are just on the cutting edge of a lot of really interesting stuff in democratizing what I've seen people talk about with virtual production stuff that it's happening with Mandalorian and all that. But I think one of the things that a lot of us who've been part of the pipeline have felt is that it's just too difficult. I mean, capturing the world and getting the data into an object where the textures are on there well. And sometimes you don't want to just capture an object. You may want to capture something in motion. So you guys are doing some amazing stuff as well. So I'll let you, Porters, you guys explain what it is that you do and the problem that you're solving.
Right. So we approach this in a very large way. So in lieu of one for one, competing in individual parts of this very elongated pipeline, to take that real world imagery data and transform it into digital assets, we approached it as an entire platform, an entire pipeline. So all the way from taking in that raw imagery data from captures of photos, scans, videos. So this could be anything from photogrammetry for 3D still objects, volumetric video for videos, objects in motion, into LiDAR scans and other types of scans. So we're a very universal solution for these data sets. The first step in our pipeline can be imagery enhancement. So denoise, deblur, degrain, auto color correct. Then we get into meshing. We actually create 3D meshes. We clean up 3D meshes, optimization, textures, and so on and so forth. So we have a massive pipeline. We have about 20 things in all. And then we output to open file types. So FBX, OBJ. We really want to work within existing pipelines and augment them in a positive way. So we're working on some plugins with industry tools already that are already out there. Your Adobe, your Autodesk, etc. And the goal, again, is just to make it more simple for anyone that doesn't have that background in that extreme, need for those minute changes and edits and all the tweaks that have to happen, but aren't really art necessarily. They're just like a byproduct of creating digital assets. Make that part really easy and simple. And we do use machine learning to not only speed up the processing time itself with our cloud processing solution, but also to increase that imagery fidelity. I'll let Tim dig in.
What was the first step that you do?
I consider it imagery or imagery enhancement, essentially. So
could you make me look handsome?
We don't have the amount of processing power. I'm sorry.
No. The AI is just not that good yet. Sorry.
Not there. Yeah, I mean, so yeah, we do a lot of image processing, taking in assets. You have to remember, depending on what cameras come in, what time of day, there's a lot of really good best practices that are out there when it comes to either photogrammetry, video capture, image capture, and what happens on the set isn't always what is supposed to happen. And so we end up getting a lot of assets out there that are either grainy, noisy, slightly blurry. We actually have companies that are notoriously high end, even with photogrammetry captures. That the assets that come out of it, unless they were cleaned up, they actually wouldn't even produce anything. So going through that first initial set, taking those images and reducing the number of issues as they come in, it doesn't just help our photogrammetry pipeline, which is taking images and going into three-dimensional assets. It also helps in video production pipeline. So we're working in principal video and photography, and also going into the compositing side of things with things like digital color correction, neutral grading, which would be going back to a standard 0. Basically, if anybody has ever looked at a camera, it sweetens it in one direction or another. It'll either go, a little red, or the Sonys are known to be more blue. And so it ends up putting it to an actual natural tone, so that when you do these post composite, you end up doing, color grading at the very end, where you're trying to make a look. You end up thinking, what happens is if you don't have a perfectly neutral grade image as it comes through, then you're doing these double transforms as far as color. So you end up doubling up, the blacks or the whites. And so you end up having to eyeball as it goes across. It ends up causing considerable amount of issues as it goes towards the end. So that is built throughout our entire process and pipeline. And yes, we do have an automatic UV system that we have in there. It is not Ministry of Flat Level, and that's actually something I talked to Eskil about, us possibly working that into part of our process and pipeline. trying to get some better solutions. The big issue that happens, and as a note, when you're talking about photogrammetry or any of these large assets, is the amount, the size of the assets that comes through. You're talking about millions upon millions of polygons, and so you end up having to spend a considerable amount of time trying to UV map them, even if they will UV map. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at.
Yeah,
But you're in Texas. Everything is bigger in Texas.
Yeah, but you know what? I mean, even with all the servers, there's just a limitation. Actually, it's a lot of these systems are fairly old who've built UV maps, and so they end up dying on the vine. Even if you let them run for absolutely ever, they will explode. Yeah.
Yeah, and we're always chasing this problem. I think we lost Tim. Did we lose Tim? Well,
He'll be back.
maybe he'll be back. So just the comment on that is, we're always chasing this problem about the size of everything and the memory constraints. I mean, I still prefer when I'm doing Blender is to work in vertex colors just to avoid the UV mapping stuff. Is to work as procedurally as much as I can because I just don't want to bake things and I don't want to go through that work. But inevitably, you have to, especially if if even if you're going to film level assets, you have to get things down to smaller meshes. You have to have higher resolution 2D textures because you're doing that. And it's not just the color, right? It's not just the albedo. It's everything. So you have multiple layers of textures now that are 4K or 8K at times. Especially when you look at things like with substance, is how many layers of textures now that you've got going on there. And then some of them need to be, scaled to different size. So depending upon if you got tessellation going on and all that kind of
Oh
stuff,
yeah.
it's like it's massive. So even though that we're getting these assets down to, well, let's decimate them to something as reasonably as possible, you're still just chasing this problem. The more you move to 2D, then the higher resolution those things get in order to make it real. Um, it-
Not even just
yeah.
that. I mean, you have to remember real-time production is a huge thing right now. That's using game engines. So you're not just doing it once. A lot of times you're doing it 3 to 5 times so that you can have an LOD for all of the potential assets that are within whatever game engine that you're using, mostly Unreal. So you're not, and then it has to look good amongst all of them, and then he has to, transfer between all of them as far as your LOD slides. So, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, so I want to talk to you guys both about this, is about the direction things are going, because we tend to think, all right, we're getting things smarter and better, but it just seems to be increasing the demand on artists, increasing the demand on more memory and things like that. Is as small as we can get these files, as much smart decimation as we can get in there, it's just more and more and more. And the pipeline of tools really hasn't gotten better or smarter. It's the same problem, just throw more people at it. So I'm just wondering what you guys think about that. Is are we going to be just hitting this point where it's like, no, we can't put as much 2D information into this stuff as we thought we were going to. We've got to figure out a better way to do it. So open-ended thoughts on the.
Yeah, we have worked on a decimation tool within our pipeline, and it actually takes 5 minutes to do, including uploading your data. Whereas an artist, of course, will take around 4 days to do that by hand. We don't expect it to be 150% done. What we anticipate with the output of our assets is that they are 80 to 90% of the way there, which most of the time that actually is fine for a background character. That is fine for some auxiliary piece or object that you need in a scene that doesn't need to be a hero asset or a hero character. And honestly, we're not trying to get rid of artists. We think the artists are really, really important, and that human element is the piece that needs to be freed up ultimately. And so getting rid of all this boring stuff that just has to be hacked at frees up the time for them to actually do those final looks and those final human touches on assets before they get implemented into a game or movie or wherever they're going.
I think Eskil's stuff is probably that first major move, though. Let's be honest. If you can't get really good UVs, then you can't get really good textures. Textures are the heavier side of things; they always have been. and without the ability to go ahead and have well done UVs. That's the part that always takes also, and we talked about it, it's a really manual process,
And
so
boring.
that and boring. You know what? Everybody always called it boring, and people used to pay me in college to actually go through and do their UV maps for them. I like it. I think it's
You
fun.
like it?
It
Okay.
doesn't work at scale. Like,
Zones
Going to
how
the
at scale? It's got
dentist.
to be
It's
automated.
very
I
zen for
know.
him.
Very, very,
It
very.
is zen. It is zen. Yeah. No. Here I am. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I think there's an opportunity. I don't know what I'm going to do next after this. I'm tied up into this for a little bit, and God knows I have a lot of projects I want to work on. But I think if there was things that I wish people would work on is really robust retopo, because there is
Yep.
no there's a lot better stuff than used to be out there, but it needs to be less an algorithm. It needs to be a full solution where you get everything, where it, you know,
What were you saying?
really, yeah, it's
Retopology.
Retopology. Yeah.
retopology. So
Yeah.
essentially, if you have a mesh that's messy, and you get a lot of messy meshes either from scanning, but also from artists, because
Sculpting.
artists likes to use tools like sculpting tools, where you just like throw infinite amount of polygons just to be able to draw a brush over it to deform it. And I think there's a opportunity there. There is Retopo right now that just turns everything into a quad mesh that is reasonably even. But what it doesn't do is it doesn't look at the mesh and say, how would this have been built if it was built like by a human being? Like
Right.
if you have a really large flat surface, that's a large flat surface, not a million little triangles, just
True.
because you have detail somewhere else. There is like edge detection. There's loads of things you can do there, but it's not really like the UV mapping that I work. The reason my UV mapping is successful is not really that I have some super secret sauce that only I have. It's a combination of knowing the problem really well. Like having been an artist, I've made assets for games. I know how to do this by hand. And the other thing is just going through the problem and actually working the problem. And every time I get a new mesh that doesn't look good, I have to figure out why doesn't it look, good on this. And that usually means, oh, I need a special case for this thing that I didn't think of before. And today, the UV Unwrapper is roughly about 25 different UV unwrapping algorithms. And a couple of those are, probably 10 different variations internally. And it's just because there isn't a solution for it. There's loads of solutions for different geometry. If you take two types of geometry, you use completely different approaches. So you need to write the code that does that. You need to write the code that detects which version to use instead of asking the artist, and 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 just not giving up on that. And a lot of people have said, why don't you let the artist, give hints, or show where they want the seams, or things like that. That would make it easier, and it would. But then you go meet some of the people from ILM that did the Transformers movies, where they have literally a million parts in a robot, and telling them to be just like, oh, just draw some seams is not possible.
Right.
It just doesn't work. So you sort of always end up needing it to be done for real, and spending the time needed to actually do that. And it's a big task, but it's the kind of thing we need. Another one of those algorithms that I want to write, but it scares me, is a proper Boolean operation implementation where you can do real cutting with polymeshes. And there are a bunch out there, but they aren't as good as they should be. And I think if you start building up those kinds of things, you can really make those are going to be the really unlocks of changing the workflow that people have, I think.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
retopo is one of the key ones. I remember Eskil, when you first came out with your UV Unwrapper, I was just like, you seem like you're about 80% there to an amazing retopo tool. And it seems like there's also an opportunity for artificial intelligence, because when you look at something like a face, right, and anybody who's ever gone through that process of retopology, is all you do, you just look up on Google and you can see the patterns of how you retopologize something for animation for a character, right? Whether it's their face or their body or what have you. There are just certain patterns, and so it almost seems like we're there, even with a lot of kind of tracking tools for face tracking for phones. Is there is a bit of a retopo that's being projected on a face for those tools? And it seems like why not just advance those? But yeah, it seems like that's been a big area that it just needs to get fixed so that you can
I
sculpt
think
these
it's one
things.
of those problems
Yeah.
where people have gotten 90% there. The problem is that the first 90% is easy. It's the second 90% that is hard, and that's kind of the problem, right? It's like you really need to move beyond just doing something that is almost good.
That's
You
almost good.
have to work really hard on that last bit, and that's the game changer.
No, you should try the one that we have. We actually have AI algorithm that goes through. It does edge flow and silhouette detection. So I'd be happy to let you guys
Cool.
all try out the one that we
Yeah,
have.
yeah, definitely. That would be really interesting to try out. And if I would also offer is another area that would be interesting is rigging. Rigging's the other area of
Yep.
that pipeline that is just notoriously arduous, right? And this is the thing I think that happens. At least this is my experience. If you come at some of this stuff as an artist, either maybe you're a developer first and an artist second, or vice versa, but you finally get to that point where you've crafted and you've created that thing that you want to bring to life, and then you have to, then you've got a retopo, and then you got a UV unmap, and then you've got a rig, and just the life gets sucked out of that, the artistic side of you. And these are, repeatable steps that if you could build it into something would be great if there were better tools to do this. And it's the
I
biggest
think
part of the pipeline.
raptiformers are
Yeah.
going to be the bigger one because
What was that?
that all goes into rigging raptiformers.
Okay.
So underneath that stuff for like blend shapes,
Yep.
there's wrap that's out there from Russian 3D, and that one's okay. But with like a fully automated solution that'll just walk from beginning to end, maybe something as well like temporal preserving of meshes, going into like volumetrics. Those are all just really nasty solutions. There are some decent solutions. I want to put air quote, but the quality that comes out ends up losing all those micro and macro details. You end up losing, your wrinkles and pores and things like that when you start getting into most of the raptiformers that are out there.
Yeah.
I want that. I want to reduce wrinkles.
Right.
But it makes everybody look dead. That's the
Yeah. Yeah.
it feels like the quality really hasn't changed that much. If you look at the the volumetric stuff that came out for the third Matrix movie, second Matrix movie, versus right now, I would say the visual quality really hasn't advanced much. Obviously, it's become much more automated, and there's a lot less handwork that's on it. But the quality, just in general, looks still just that same. Of doesn't quite look human.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, I live in
I think
Arizona, and some are already looked at.
I think there's another question that I'm definitely thinking a lot about, and that's sort of, we're getting better and better. We have more and more polygons, but we've definitely reached the point where we can have micro polygons in real time. We can have that half a polygon per,
Nanite, right?
Pixel.
yeah, we can have two polygons per pixel. We can do that, and I think one of the problems that I see is that we're not reinventing the workflow, and we're not stopping working on quality. And we need to, a lot of things, especially from the gaming perspective, is like it's so diminishing returns at this point. The games aren't getting better because of graphics. They're not, you're not getting anything for it. And the projects that I think are interesting in this space is Dreams, which is the PlayStation 5 game,
Yeah.
which is
Cool.
also a
Very interesting.
magical editor that
Mhm.
you can do anything in, and it has a completely different way of doing geometry and thinking about complexity and things like that. The other project that I think is super interesting is Notch. If you don't know about it, it is a full real-time engine that is mainly used for things like concerts, where you want graphics on big projectors or displays that is real time and can react to what artists are doing in front of it. But it's used for all kinds of installation work and things like that, and sort of motion graphicsy stuff. But what they're doing is they just put a hard line saying nothing goes into the software that isn't real time. All the rendering is real time, and my suspicion is that eventually that is going to just eat everybody's lunch, because they just put that hard limit, and as they can do more and more, people are just going to say, why am I even bothering with a rendering engine? Why am I bothering with anything else? I can do everything in real time.
Sure.
So I think there are some really interesting things there. I'm thinking like we need to worry much more about Blind's law. Uh, Blind's law is the law that says that no matter how fast computer you get, all rendering frames take the same amount of time to render, because artists will just put more stuff in there.
Yep.
And that is a problem, not just
Producers
because
will have the artists put more stuff in
Right.
there
well that's kind of the
with
problem
crunch
also.
time.
It's yeah, and that's kind of the problem right now is
Yep.
that we need, artists generally just want to put more details in it, and in my experience, at least in the game industry, that's kind of detrimental. It usually doesn't make the games better, and it sort of doesn't help the end product. And I think sometimes we can definitely get into the, we can't see the forest for all the trees situation with that. So
Sure.
I think we need to have like a really we need to figure out what we want to do, and what the workflow for that is. And it's not just giving artists more tools, it's about giving them the right tools. And it's also about like hiding certain things from the artists in order to get them to use the right tools. And that, I think, it's a really, really interesting area of development.
Yeah, I think the best way to kind of go around that, if you're talking about, Uncanny Valley and what causes Uncanny Valley, there's two separate lines if people haven't seen the extended version of it. There's one line which is based off of visual, which says as you get more realistic, it has this drop off and then it comes back up again and becomes more realistic. You end up crossing the Uncanny Valley into realism. There's a second line, and that involves movement. That line shows that the same asset and same thing, if it was still, would look more realistic so long as it doesn't move, right? So if it starts moving, if you end up having like a robotic hand, it looks good. Yeah, that's great. And it starts moving. It's like, and you're like, that's not real. And so, same thing with zombies. Zombies look much more realistic before they start to move, and then they move unlike humans. And
Thank
so
you.
we're
Wait.
moving towards, or Eric, as we start moving towards more realistic things.
I look great until I move. Thank you.
Yeah, right. Thanks, Eric. As we start moving down that world, the better solutions, obviously, motion capture, facial motion capture, volumetric video is going to help out in that world. It really kind of comes just like you're saying. How do we get those tools into the right hands? And the bigger thing that we are doing is we're becoming in this very destructive kind of phase of creation, where we're going from photogrammetry mocap into volumetric video, and like how do you start cleaning that up? And there are a couple of different companies that are trying to go in that world of making motion capture volumetric combination tech, where it allows the movement of motion capture and the changes that can happen with an artist that adds into it. And then you take the volumetric video and you basically reskin it over a rig, and then you end up running mocap over it, and then redo parts of movements and walks and handshakes and things like that. But it really kind of comes down to, I think the best tools are really going to be AI assistance movement tools. So there is one that has come out just recently, which you do the keyframes, and then it fills it in with human motion data. So all you have to do is your key poses. Someone starts here, starts there, starts there. They don't even have to do walking poses. Somebody starts walking there and walks all the way to the end, and then it ends up doing a naturalistic walk based on their height and everything like that. Or you have somebody step up and step down, and you can do all that, and it does all of that human motion, and then you can add in a whole bunch of different places. And I think that gives the realism or anti-realism, depending on how far you want to go as far as tune, non-tune, and things like that you can add into an algorithm, and then you can get to the massive amounts of content that we're trying to deliver. I mean, you have to think, the number of assets in a game going back like 10 years, the amount, is like 10 times, 100 times, right now.
We need a yellow circle that does this.
Yeah.
And fork out.
Yeah, exactly. Nom nom nom. That was a game. The original sound was actually somebody's finger in an ear, and then they tried to recreate it. He was itching his ear.
So this is what I find interesting about this conversation.
Yeah. I hear it.
Right? When we started the Innovative program, Eskil was one of the first people I think we tapped, because he had an amazing reputation. He said the name. I'm gonna have him repronounce it again because I don't want to screw it up. But he was just super well respected in Europe. But definitely he was in the gaming industry. What was it called? The Solaar?
Solaar is my company.
Solaar. Yeah, right. So we brought him in. He was definitely in video games, and it was amazing. And then Tim and Alex, we met you two. I believe one of the events that we went to, and at the time you guys were also right, and you guys were also in a gaming industry. And then, so like Alex, you guys have moved from making real video games to in this, this what people would claim is an ancillary thing. But this is what I find really interesting. Is between Eskil and his UV Unwrapping and all the work you guys are doing with all the metrics, it's showing that the gaming technology, to call it that, is bleeding, right? It's growing. It's I mean, I don't want to call you out, Alex, but like, I'm guessing most of your work isn't on games anymore. You're doing videos and things like that, even though that's your background.
Yeah, no, our background absolutely was in gaming. We ported over to virtual reality and augmented reality in the very beginnings of that commercialization phase, and we were even at that juncture, we were really kind of straddling two worlds and helping some of the early folks in VR and AR figure out how to functionally use gaming technologies in other uses. And so that's been it's actually been primarily what we've done as entrepreneurs, owning our own businesses. And the real focus for us, I think, has always been how do you combine technology effectively to make these really powerful tools that can move industries forward. And so we've worked across many industries. We've worked in medical, we've worked in corporate, we've worked in entertainment, but it's always been a lot of tools-based things where we're creating, return on investment, early return on investment for companies using VR. When VR was first coming out, a lot of the industry was very focused on gaming, very focused on eventually gaming sort of hedged into like brand experiences and that type of thing, which was still very gaming centric. And then we started seeing more use cases, but we really, we were doing that from the beginning, and it's been really fascinating to watch the sort of ebb and flow and uptick of how these things are becoming more ubiquitous across industries. And this switch over, to virtual production legitimately is 100% the movie industry getting on board with what the gaming industry has been doing for many, many, many years. Yeah. So we're really excited to be sort of at the forefront of that. And a lot of what we're doing was with that foresight of this technology can legitimately change the way that their sort of old school pipelines that are not very functional and very, very human capital intensive. How do they switch over? How do they become more technological and less reliant on heavy overtime and the other things the entertainment industry is known for? And how do we, create a better life for creators and get more inspiration and give them the space and the time and the energy back to really bring that content to life?
Yeah. That's awesome. I think Eric has touched on something that is interesting, is seeing those who started in the industry because of the love of games, right? And I think almost every game developer that we know is started in that process because it's like, you know what, I want to be able to create my own game. I love gaming, and you guys have kind of gone like how actors go from the front of the camera to behind the camera, and helping the industry itself is improving that pipeline of tools. And we also see with like Lee Bamber as well. I mean, he has his own game engine. Mike Kasprzak, starting games and then it created Let 'Em Dare, and he's also done some stuff on game serving and game hosting. And so it's great to see that you guys who have the experience and have put time into creating that craft are now making the craft easier for others. So it's just awesome to see.
I think that I think all great artists care about technology, the tech they're using, the tools they're using, and it's I grew up being a huge fan of a lot of movie makers, and if you look at people like Coppola and George Lucas and co, they've all been very interested in camera technology, editing, and all those things.
Yeah, they're techies.
And a lot of that came, and I think that to me is like the people who really want to push a medium, they start caring about the technology.
Mhm.
And my UV Unwrapper started out well over 10 years ago, and I wrote it as a little hack, and it was like a party trick. I would show it to people at parties, and it wasn't very good, but it did like small poly meshes, and people would be like, "Ooh, that's cool." And I didn't use it very much in production. And then a couple of years ago, I was working at a company, and that all fell apart. And I got home, and I was like, I don't want to do anything. What should I do? And I thought, oh, let's look at this old code here. It doesn't run with my new code base. I should just port it over. So it'll take a week or two. And I did that. And then I was like, I can improve this thing. And this thing could probably be better. And I started, tinkering with it. And then I have a friend here in Stockholm, and he went to a user group meeting for Houdini users. And he came back and was like, there's this guy from DICE and another guy from Avalanche Studios, and they're really interested in what you're doing. Do you mind if I give them your contacts? And I was like, sure. And they invited me, and they were like, you should keep working on this. And then I did. And then Bob got hold of me and was like, this is really cool. We're going to SIGGRAPH. Would you like to come and give a talk? And then once I got to SIGGRAPH, Bob was like, I'm sorry, but someone who was going to show at our booth couldn't make it. Would you mind getting a spot in the Intel booth? And I was like, sure. And then sort of all hell broke loose because everybody showed up at my talks, and everybody showed up at the booth. And yeah, the sort of the email box has been full ever since, pretty much.
And we're
Yeah,
not just talking
but
attendees. We're talking big players. It's like, who's this?
Yeah, it was,
Yeah.
I gave that talk, and I like realized there was like someone from Apple, someone from Pixar, someone from Blizzard Entertainment, and just like it kept going. Like Disney was there, and I was like, whoa, okay. So all these people
but
care about it.
but Eskil, you did one crucial mistake, because I remember that show. Yes, it was a horrible mistake. I remember you were at the show. You had your demo, and you had this incredibly complex spaceship. It just felt huge. I think it was like, I don't know, many big, huge thing, right? And you hit a button, and and it unwrapped.
Yep.
It was too fast.
I know that was my big problem.
Yeah,
It was
yeah.
a live demo.
Yeah,
It was
because
like,
that was
you
Here's a dude
spent weeks
scanning and
on
loading
rendering it, and then
files
you
that
just
I UV mapped in advance. What's fun about that? And I
yeah,
didn't have a sign either because, again, I jumped in
you were
because
last minute. I
whoever
remember.
was going to have that spot just like missed the flight or something happened. They had to
You had an
cancel.
X-wing fighter as well. I remember that. Yeah, and that was the problem, is that you just hit a button, it would just almost instantaneously pop up, and nobody believed you did it real, like in real time. And then so next time,
Next
Add some
time I'm
graphic
going to make
code.
it slower. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
slow down.
give
it
it
was
a
also
good 3-4 seconds. Let it render slowly, and then people will be
It
like,
was
"Oh
all
yeah, it'll get real fun."
Intel provided me with because it was twice as
We-
fast as the one I was
That's
testing
true.
at home.
It was a good
We
system.
apologize for that. It won't happen again. We're so sorry. We take full blame.
Yeah. So
You should do the Sketchfab scroll. Go, all right, which one are we doing? That one.
yeah.
Go.
But no,
Because
I mean
all
that
those are
was
really badly UV'd, to be honest.
yeah that was like a really amazing experience, and I learned a whole bunch of things. So some of the things I learned, that this was my idea, is I thought that if I did this, all the artists are going to love me, because every artist in the world hates UV unwrapping. And they're going to go to their managers and say, oh, you got to buy the software. And the managers are going to be like, why do I have to pay for this thing? And then they're going to have to convince those people that, like, you know, this thing is needed. And then if lots of studios start using it, maybe some like tech companies and people like that will get in touch, right? Eventually. And I was completely wrong.
Okay.
Because all the artists, as soon as you tell them, oh, I have a automated UV Unwrapper, the first thing they said, oh, that'll never work. Because they've seen so many and they all suck. So they were all like, So at my talk, there was 0 artists there, because no artist believes that it's doable. On the other hand, all their managers were there because they knew how much money they were spending, and they knew that it was a huge problem. So they were all coming. And also a bunch of technology companies came out of the woodwork, and it wasn't because they were thinking about artists. It was much more to do with scanning and you know, world acquisition and that kind of stuff. So I was completely wrong, but it worked out. And it's always fun to show artists. Yeah,
it's funny.
Always fun to show artists, because it just like, it takes them a good while to be like, no, this isn't real, is it? And,
I told you it was too fast. I told you.
Yeah, it was an Unreal demo. It was it was too good to be true. No, it's like, that's just a little video file he's running. So,
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. That's what.
Artists think that our AI is going to steal their jobs.
Yeah,
that's something
too bad.
We get the pushback of, oh, you know, there's a misunderstanding that AI is going to do that, and I'm like, it replaces the boring stuff that you don't want to do anyway. Exactly. That's what it does. It makes you more effective at the things that only you.
Actually, Alex, I am going to argue with you on that. I think you're right on digital art, but I do think there's a type of artist that AI will replace. Right? If you're a fan of sci-fi like I am, like Babylon 5 and, you know, Klingons and whatever, right? How many of those actors spend the first, 3 hours of their day sitting in a chair where someone's like putting on their ridged forehead or their, Vulcan ears or all that stuff, right? Imagine a future where I just come on screen, I do my lines, and then some AI goes off and puts my Vulcan ridges or my Klingon ridges or my Vulcan ears or whatever alien it is, and
eventually,
and
I can just do it. Yeah.
I think I will tell you, actually, to counter that argument, we have actually captured physical VFX in volumetric video.
Right.
If you check out our Sketchfab, our GLTF demo is this like alien biker chick that has like a green mohawk, and that was all physical VFX.
Yep.
From a company.
It's the same studio that does the Fear of the Walking Dead and a lot of Del Toro stuff. So they did. What was the? Yep.
Hogfly.
Okay, but
I went to a SIGGRAPH talk where Phil Tippett was there, who's mastermind of all things creatures, and he was working on Jurassic Park, and they were making claymation, a claymation test to see if they could do good dinosaurs, and he was a huge fan of the Harryhausen, what's it called, Land Before Dawn, I think, the really old claymation dinosaurs, and he was super excited about it. And he got to see a preview of the digital artists, what they were working on, and the first test shot of a Tyrannosaurus that was all digital. And apparently he said that night he contemplated committing suicide because he knew his life was over. Yeah, he took it extremely seriously. So yeah,
It's like the invention of the compass is what it is. It's any tool that was created that makes it easier for artists to do something over and over and over again. It's just that's all it is, and it allows them. So yeah, maybe the makeup artist doesn't have to sit in front of that actor for 3 hours putting the makeup on. Maybe the makeup artist can work on a new design, another character, another iteration of what could happen, right? So you give the artist more time to do things that they wouldn't normally be able to do. So I think it frees up time and gets you more into art. And you already talked about this, Eskil. It's like, you know what? If you free up more time, you're just going to put more time back into it. It's just like yep. So
I think we in visual effects for movies, with stagecraft and the ability to get everything in camera, I definitely think we're going back to some physical props and physical effects and blending that. I think that's definitely making a comeback, sort of. I think it's interesting, like whenever people talk about how realistic things has to be, and the pores and the details. I generally think of R2D2, because he's like one of the greatest characters ever.
Yep.
And he's like the easiest thing to animate you could imagine. He can like rotate his head, make some sounds, go backwards and forward, and that's it. And that's really all you need to make a character. Like, all the people who are sweating about pores, they should take a look at R2. And I think we really, it's sometimes really easy to get lost in the tools and just see the possibilities, and actually not recognize the possibilities that lies in limitations. And I think that, to me, is like, it's a tricky thing to do, because there's a lot of content out there that is like masterfully technically done, that is just plain boring to watch. And then you watch something very simple where it sort of clicks, and it you can go back to Lux Junior, the first proper animated short film that Pixar did, with the lamp, with the two lamps, and it just works. And it's simple, and it's it doesn't have a background, it doesn't have XYZ, it doesn't have skinning,
Like
it
Bob.
doesn't have all these things. It's super simple, but it works. And I'm really interested in like, how do we make tools for that, and how do we make that kind of artistic creation possible, and not just obsess about like, how do we get all the numbers, so.
And,
But
and
yeah,
to be clear,
that's
Bob,
my
I think
personal thing.
to be clear, Bob, I meant you had no background, not that you were simple. That's
yeah, nothing going on here.
yeah. So
Yeah.
You'll fix it in post.
Right. I think we took the opposite approach to that, meaning we wanted to free up the creative to, and honestly, an artist can take something that's captured, from real world imagery and, interpret it however. It could be, cartoony, it could be avatar level. You can use volumetrics to run facial animations so that you get those millions of points versus just a few hundred points. So there's a wide variety of ways that it can be used. But we're anticipating people are pushing more toward that content, and we don't think that the magical realism is there yet. We don't think it's going to be there for a very long time, but we can help it ebb that way a little bit. And really, again, it's the combination technologies. I don't think volumetrics is the answer for everything right now at all. I think that the capture of a body in volumetrics is still imperfect. It's still very imperfect. And that's one of the reasons that, adding in motion capture, adding in photogrammetry, so you can get those details, so that you can get the right body mechanics, so that you can get closer to that realism level, I think is really important. And not just operating like this is the thing that's going to magically save the world from the Uncanny Valley. But the other thing really is just, kind of figuring out what the world is looking for. The demand for content is going up massively, right? As we all sit in our homes, bound to our computers and televisions and living our virtual life.
Well, that and all the cable companies have come back out. I mean, streaming companies, sorry.
cable
Mhm.
cable Lamo streaming companies, and whatever the next iteration of that is. The themes that we've heard, around content are primarily around how do you make your library more searchable? How do you make it more effective to splice and dice content for the user? But the thing is, that's because there's no new content currently really being generated, not in mass like it was. And so as virtual production gets figured out, as remote production also comes in, which is using cameras, using portable rigs, using alternative production capabilities to actually capture actors, actresses, what have you. Those things are also going to start pushing this content pipeline forward. And the way that we look at the capacity, there is always absolutely the opportunity to just add more in and keep tweaking and tweaking and tweaking. But we also think that with the demand, that the opening up that capacity so that there can be more created will actually help ease the strain on that pipeline long term.
I don't know if you guys saw if you watched the show, The Blacklist.
I watched that forever ago.
Right. So they got very close to the end of their episode, just when the pandemic broke out and all that. And they were very frustrated because they wanted to finish the episode, be done with the season, right? And so the very last episode, I'm not going to, no spoilers, right? But they did some really interesting artistic stuff where they had some real person captured on screen things. And then they had like a very weird, like cartoonish way to do it. So they kept flipping back and forth. It was almost like that old music video when MTV actually played music videos of, what was it, Aha?
Take
Take
on
on
me.
Me.
Take on Me, right? And they could pull into the mirror, right? They were all, right. You're right. And it wasn't quite that bad, but it was really close. But honestly, even though there was such this weird shifting between real person screens and cartoonish type of thing, the story held together, and it was a fine episode. And I think it goes to your point of you don't necessarily need a million pixels for everything. If you got a good story, sometimes good enough art is good enough.
Yeah, I think that's what we're talking about is really the democratization of being creative, right? Is more and more is moving digital. And I was just looking up here because somebody was talking about stop motion is key mesh for Blender, which is a stop motion tool in Blender. So now that it gives Blender users the ability to do stop motion style, art, and that's not hyper realistic. But now you have the tool to do something that you might have fallen in love with as a kid, watching all those. Christmas
Wallace and
stories, Wallace and Gromit, yeah, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, and all that kind of stuff. So, Heat Miser, and what was the other guy? But I love those holiday shows. And Heat Miser, I'm Mr. Sun, right? Yeah, so I think that's it. And you guys are kind of in this space right now where you're helping the tools advance so that more people can get into this stuff. And it's going beyond gaming. It's getting into other industries. It's getting into real estate. It's obviously been in film for a while, but now these tools are allowing people to dive into this. And where I think, frankly, the artists will have more time to do some of the stuff that they're focused on to move their art forward. But at the same time, Eskil's right. It's just because you have better tools doesn't make it better art. One of my favorite characters in Disney is just the carpet in
Aladdin.
Yeah, thank you. Right,
Yeah.
right. It's just beautifully done. It's just all that emotion, right, in that rectangular figure. So the artists still need to be able to put their art in. They still need to be able to do their craft. But the tools don't solve it. It just makes certain things to them that were out of touch accessible, at least in my mind.
Look at how many seasons South Park has been on, right? Despite their very crude art. And I'll be honest, Tim, when you first said your Valley thing, it glitched on my end, and I thought you said it's Kilkenny Valley.
Of course it is. Every single episode, at least once.
Okay.
Didn't they stop doing that though? I mean, it was a running joke for so long, and then they stopped doing it. Yeah.
I can't say I've watched it. What's funny is I used to work out at my apartment gym, and that was on it was always South Park was on, and you couldn't reach it to change it. So at some point in time, I'm like, you know, I might as well like start to either like this or like just turn part of my brain off. So I started getting into it, and I watched all these old episodes, and I'm like, this is so good, but so bad. And you're right, it's the animation. You're like, you know, I think if I remember right, they put it together in like, you know, an entire season in like a week or two, and you're just like, it's insane because it's all built off of, you know, character. It's very little animation. A lot of it really kind of comes down to, you know, just people filling in the gaps. And you're right, you know, like Luxo has almost nothing to it, but you get full emotions. You're like, oh, it's smiling, it's laughing, it's, you know, it's, you know, having fun. And it's like, oh, at the very end when like it looks and you're talking about the Pixar logo, oops, I did that, you know, kind of thing. And you get a entire gambit of emotions. And you know, you're 100% correct. There needs to be answers though for all of the different problems that we're coming into. You know, if people want to go hyper real, you know, let them go hyper real. You're right. You know, I'm on the same thing. The industry will never reach realism because they believe that they've already achieved it. And so there's always somebody who goes, things get any better is when somebody else does something better than the other person. So it's this game of like one-upmanship and not really quality. You know, I mean, if you look at the stuff that came out in Star Wars, you know, the redos were just horrible. You're like, we didn't need that. Just take it away, you know? And then over and over and over again. And the quality just doesn't, it's not any better. And they went back through
Yeah,
90 billion times
you know
and
what
never will.
I'm thinking of
Yeah.
is you can look back in the 70s and you watch sci-fi shows and you'll see the
Yeah.
same blinky light computer, you know, in one episode of one thing, and then it's in another movie and it's the same thing.
Yeah.
And now we're getting that way with like Quixel Mixer.
Yeah.
It's the same scanned boulder from Quixel, you know, in this game and in that game. It's just turned sideways this way, it's turned sideways that way. So it does allow people to be a little bit lazy sometimes when you've got these tools and they're easily accessible. So yes, the artists have to do their job for sure.
So I mean, on that, and that is the whole. Yeah, go for it. You want to say it?
I was going to say we actually went for real world imagery because we're like, oh my gosh, the asset flip is such a gross thing that happens in the industry. Everybody has the same thing. You know, oh, it's just the same building. They just changed the shader or whatever. It's terrible. And then everything looks exactly the same. And ultimately, you have to be able to create new content easily. And that's where we really focus.
Yeah, but it's like the Hanna-Barbera cartoons, right? The same background would be going by, and you get to be a certain age before you ever realize that, wait a minute, I'm seeing the same cactus go by 14 times. When you never paid
just
attention
draw
to
that over and over and over again.
Yeah,
I know.
Very good. All right.
Did I just ruin your childhood? I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Send me to the therapist, Phil.
It was already a little bit charred. Now it's gone. Sorry.
It's gone. You've devastated me. Talk about decimate.
Yeah, decimate. There we go. Bump. Hey guys, we're gonna. Okay. Go ahead, finish up Eskil, and then we're gonna wrap it up. I think we're just about over the hour mark, so let's go ahead and.
Yeah, I think one of the key things that we need to focus on is less about like production and more about iteration, and having the ability to iterate. And a lot of people sort of build tools with the idea that everyone knows exactly what they want on day one, and then it's all about just producing that content. That's not real life. Real life, you iterate, and building systems where people can iterate and collaborate and change their minds. That I think is a shift that we need to do. And I remember many years ago, probably in the 90s, the first time I saw a flame operator. So a flame was sort of, if you think of After Effects, but it was a computer that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, and it was a magical room that was dark, and it was a cool person sitting in there making hundreds of dollars a minute, it felt like, and you could go in there with your 30 seconds commercial and they would do amazing things like paint or color correct or do things. And I think it came out in like 92, and if you actually start looking at like commercials all commercials before 92 look terrible. And then in the 90s, everything gets like super saturated and flashy and everything looks really like bling. And that was pretty much the flame. But the thing that was so special about that tool was that you would rent it per hour. So the director would come in and sit next to an artist and point to the screen and say, I want this, I want that. Can you do this? Can you do that? So it was a completely artist-driven tool. And it was not something, it was meant to be a sort of creative discussion between an operator and an artist. And it was all about like, what can you do in the 3 or 5 or 6 hours that you rented this machine, right? So how good can you make your 30-second thing? And putting those limits made that it incredibly creative. It made it sort of this thing. And a lot of people who were in the film industry, and especially in the ad industry, they sort of had this huge love for this process because it was sort of a room they could go in and be artists. And I think those kinds of tools, we're not quite making them that way. But I think that's something I'm really looking forward to seeing more.
Well, I think, to that answer, I think we have some really good things that are going in there. Obviously, with the push towards real-time production, there are entire render farms that are going to be left open. And then as well, with the acceptance of cloud, we have that with the further movement towards DevOps and Kubernetes, Docker movement with containered, I always say that wrong. We have an entire massive movement of software development clashing into what is real-time movie game development, and we can get that iterative cycle, and we can get all these different cool permutations that maybe an artist gets 50 different selections that they can go through, and it can be artist driven, it can be pushed through, and then it would stuff that would have eventually originally taken an artist 20-30 hours to even get to one version of it. They can have 90 different versions that are at the click of a finger. And so I think that's really kind of where that movement goes to. And being able to, like you said, in an artistic process, nobody really does know what they want to do, but if you have some assistance, some tools, and some really amazing processing power behind it, I think you'll end up getting to where you want to go for sure. So
very good. It's been absolutely amazing to listen to you guys about what you're doing, how the pipeline is innovating. So what we'll do is, if you guys send us off, make sure that you tell where people can find you. Give us a URL. So Alex, tell us where people can find more about Montec Lab.
Monteclabs.com, modtechlabs.com. That's us. You can find me on LinkedIn, Alex Porter. Reach out, connect, love to chat.
Very good.
And I'm at the same URL. I'm Tim Porter, and then you can also you can find me on Twitter as well, around on Montec Labs as well. So
thanks, Tim. And Eskil.
And yeah, you can find my UV Unwrapper at ministryofaFlat.com, and you can find me at quelsolar.com, QUELSOLAAR. And you can also find Kel Solaar on Twitter and Eskil Steenberg with 2 E's on Twitter. Those are my main modes of communication.
We will put the links in the description below. Don't worry. So people won't have to remember all the spellings. So we promise. We have the technology.
Good.
We have the pipeline.
There it is.
Awesome. No real like company names left, so everything's spelled weird.
Yeah.
It's Star with 17 R's. What?
Right. Excellent. All right. Thanks, guys, for joining us on this episode of Between Two Bites. So that's a wrap of our show. So, folks, if you enjoyed it, please hit like and subscribe below. That's a wrap of the show. And Eric, I don't know, any last thoughts, a joke for us before we head out?
Yeah, so I'm going to go off the same theme as last time, right? Ways to tell if you're an Uber geek.
All right.
If your attempt to make a homemade lightsaber got you on the evening news in Russia, you might be an Uber geek. So there you go.
I didn't make it all the way to Russia. It was to Israel. but most close.
You know what? That qualifies. You'll get this. You'll get the special Dakota ring. I promise.
Sweet.
Where's my lightsaber?
It only says candy.
Hold on before we do this. Hold on. Wait. Hold on. Stay there.
Wait, he's going to pull out his lightsaber. I'm going to put a bet.
I bought a very small lightsaber and I had to bring it through airport security. And the guy asked me, "Is this a weapon?" And I was like, "Should I tell him yes or no?"
You should ask him if he graduated high school.
Yeah.
That'll do well.
Only in a galaxy far.
Body cavity search coming your way.
Just
I found with TSA the only right answer is no. This one, is it a weapon? No.
I don't know. What's the correct answer, Asa?
Yeah.
There it is.
So Bob, what do you got?
This is the worst, absolutely cheapest lightsaber. I have two of them, but I got it at South by Southwest in your guys' neighborhood, right? But obviously, when you're walking around there, they'll give you anything that glows in the dark. But I have these two.
They will.
Yeah, they used to hang in my wall in my office at my house when I had a house.
But
there we go.
Has it gotten you on the evening news?
No, it got me on Between Two Bites.
Not yet. That was even better.
I'm on YouTube. There it is.
And with that, we'll call it a wrap.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for joining.
Bye.
See you later.
Bye.